Yeah, thank you very much, Jasper, and welcome, Chris. I'm going to let kind of Chris introduce himself as well, um, but really, so Chris, tell us about yourself. How did you get into this? What is Chris's mission, and why do you defend decentralization so strongly?
Okay, before we get started, I just want to say I am a fat, bald, white male wearing a black t-shirt and no pants. Um, so I am I guess a decentralization maximus is a good way to look at it. But really, I think what I do in the space is I'm kind of more about transparency and honesty in the space than anything else. So what I've done for a few years now is I've looked for ways that people are using protocols and projects in DeFi and crypto without really understanding the trust requirements, because almost everything in this space requires that you trust somebody at some point. As we like to say, even Bitcoin, which is kind of like the maximally decentralized thing that we can use, still requires you to trust in certain parties in some ways, even if it's just the analysts who are review or the auditors who are reviewing code and explaining it to you. You still have to trust somebody. But in DeFi, of course, as we know, it ranges from totally trustless stuff like liquidity, maximally decentralized things like Rocket Pool, and then the other end of the spectrum, pieces of garbage protocols that are secured by multi-sigs and where two or three people can rug you. So my goal has really just been to explain and expose a lot of those things around the space, and to applaud protocols that are doing it right, and to sort of expose protocols that are hiding their weak spots. And those range from small kind of scam things to giant projects like Chainlink. So that's kind of a summary of what I do and why I've been doing it.
Yeah, there's certainly kind of a spectrum um, out there, and it's not always evident. So that is definitely kind of strong. There's definitely worthwhile work. Um, with kind of like centralized entities being in the spotlight over the last few months, not exactly for the right reasons, I guess. Um, is Do you think crypto is kind of shifting back to its decentralization or decentralized roots, or is it kind of like a phase? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
No, definitely it's shifting away from decentralized roots, I think. I'm curious why you think it would be shifting towards it. I think it's shifting away from it. I guess there's different layers, right? There's like, people confuse a lot of what's happening in DeFi with what's happening, in other areas like exchanges and things like that are not crypto. So people are saying like, "Oh, crypto's in danger right now because of regulations." No, it's not. It's not in danger. What's in danger is all the trash that's blossomed up around it, and all the leeches who have come in to try to be middlemen in the crypto space. They're the ones that are in danger. But the actual tech is not in danger. But at the same time, people are abusing the tech and using it in ways it was never meant to be used. So um, it's a tricky question. I just think there's more and more people that are going to come into a programmable space like Ethereum and are going to abuse it. We haven't seen the end of it. We thought maybe after ICOs in 2017 we saw the end of it, right? And then people figured out how to completely ruin DeFi. And now the next wave is going to be probably even shadier and weirder and worse. And I skipped over NFTs. That whole thing was a mess too. But no, I think we're going to keep with every wave. I think we're going to see a smaller and smaller percentage of people actually caring about decentralization.
Yeah. So I mean, so what I'm kind of getting at there is more along the lines of there. there seem to be some sort of complacency around kind of centralized entities, particularly exchanges, I guess. But there seems to be, this kind of trust in centralized entities, whereas at the moment we do seem to have a bit of a sentiment shift towards kind of not trusting them, and kind of moving towards kind of more decentralized kind of protocols. I guess to kind of touch on another point that we raised earlier as well, just because you use decentralized tech doesn't mean that you are decentralized, and that's why kind of your role is quite important.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what my role is half the time, to be honest with you. But as far as like what you're saying, the decentralized tech, like the truly decentralized tech, the truly immutable and unattackable technology, um, like Bitcoin, which okay, it's attackable in some ways, but when you're talking about what can the SEC, what can the government do to Bitcoin, the protocol right now, it's pretty hard for them to attack it. It's not as easy as attacking like FTX or something like that, or the other leeches that bloomed up around it. So those protocols are going to be the ones that end up surviving. It's not going to be that in the
I think we lost you there, Chris.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I'm back now. What I was saying was, I don't think that in the long run, the majority of people in the world are going to choose to use decentralized tech. But I think that eventually they're not really going to have a choice, because everything that's not decentralized is going to be either attacked or ruined by government or something else. And normies are using Bitcoin now, not because it's decentralized, but because it's a great asset. It's a great thing for them to use. For savings, for whatever they're using it for. They don't care if it's decentralized or not, but they do care that it's immutable and that it can't be touched by regulation. In the same way as physical gold. So I think the same is going to happen with protocols. You look at Liquidity, you look at some of these other protocols, and Rocket Pool, to a certain extent, are much harder to attack, or much harder to shut down. So they're going to survive. These are like the cockroaches, in a good way, of the industry, where they'll survive a nuclear blast, and people are going to use them not because they're decentralized, but just because they're the only ones left after a while. That's how I'm looking at the development of decentralized tech right now.
Yeah, I just want to.
Here's to the cockroaches.
Exactly, cockroaches is in a good way. Like there's probably a better.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and echo what you're saying, Chris, with this cockroach metaphor. I think it's like really apt. Right now we're seeing all the staking and stablecoin providers getting hounded by the SEC, and it's sort of creating this huge cloud of doubt. Whereas decentralized staking protocols have just been on a massive rally and have gotten a huge amount of mind share because they are this sort of expected cockroach. So, what are your thoughts about this whole Kraken fiasco going on right now? Sorry if I'm stealing a future question from you, Darren.
That's all good. Go for
it. Which fiasco are we talking about? Because there's a lot.
Let's start with the specifically Kraken staking. And then the general approach of the SEC to staking custodial staking products.
I mean, whether or not I think it's fair or whatever is one thing. But my theory on all this is, if it can be regulated, it will be regulated, and it'll probably be regulated unfairly. So when you're talking about centralized exchanges, they're playing a game where they know they're regulated, they know they're attackable, and they're playing a game. They're just hoping that regulators don't completely screw them over too badly. When they start their business, they're thinking this. And there are also DeFi protocols, on-chain protocols, that are thinking in the same way. And I'm not talking like small little scams. I'm talking like Aave. I'm talking like big players in the space who are hoping, and I'm curious if Rocket Pool falls into this category or not. I'm not sure yet, but there are people in this space that are launching businesses, launching protocols, hoping that regulators treat them fairly. And what we know from history is 100% of the time, regulators will not treat you fairly, ever, ever, ever. And so Kraken played the game and lost. Now, I think it was crap. I think the SEC is completely dropping the ball, to be honest with you, on how they're doing this, because they're just going to push business into other countries, and they're going to push Americans into other countries eventually. I'm already working on passports, as everybody should be, by the way, because you got to vote with your feet after a while. It's like, why do you want to live in a country that's completely screwing you financially and completely eliminating choices for you as far as how you can invest your own personal money? Screw that. We live in a day and age where you can pick up, pack your bag, and go to another country and live there and screw your old country. And yeah, by the way, it's getting harder and harder to get rid of your American citizenship. So that's a whole other problem. But anyway, yeah, so I think Kraken played the game and lost, and other exchanges are in the same boat. And it was always meant to be this way. It was predestined.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, there is no actionable regulation. There's nothing that we can do at the moment. But we're kind of the Rocket Pool as an entity. We're in Australia, so we're keeping an eye on the Australian kind of regulation scene. They have actually been very, I would say, not forward thinking, but certainly that we are seeing kind of blossoms of hope. They've recently done like a token mapping thing, which actually was very, very well researched and had some very positive things in there. So yeah, there's nothing that we can do that's actionable at this stage.
I think that Australian paper you're talking about had references to like data availability layers, ZK provers. It was one of the most well researched government pieces I've read. It was impressive.
Yeah, it had like stuff from Vitalik in there, and it made some very some very on point definitions of what this is, what this isn't, and that sort of thing. Particularly, there was the definition between what is essentially CeFi and what is DeFi. And
why do you care? Why do you care what the Australian government thinks of it? Why do you care what they think of Rocket Pool?
Well, it's not necessarily. It just makes life easier.
Now, talk to me. In what way? Like what? For who? It keeps you out of jail, or like what? Like what are we saying here? Like, because Australia does also have a history of screwing over tech, and if I'm not mistaken, they actually have. I was researching some of this with Ren Protocol, which was largely based there, and Australia actually has a law on the books that says they can force a developer to actually build technology to subvert their own tech. They can force them to do it privately, secretly, and not tell anybody. And they could force you to build something, not tell anybody, deploy it. Like what kind of? That's what makes me nervous about Australia every time I hear. Is that law still on the books?
I believe, I don't know whether it actually got through or not, but yes, there was definitely that was definitely on the cards. Not a great moment.
But for Rocket Pool though, it has to be said that everything is developed in the open, wide open, where tons of audits,
right.
multiple rounds of audits, and a bug bounty. So while there might be this cloud of doubt hanging over certain industries and certain closed towards text, I mean, with Rocket Pool, you don't have to trust; you can verify.
That's the great thing about kind of open source development, and that kind of open the fact that Ethereum is verifiable and you can see the code on chain. We can't just do that. yeah, everything has to go through governance and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, there's not it's not like we can do that anyway. So that's that. Okay, so I guess what makes kind of DeFi different to kind of CeFi or TradFi? Do you think? What characteristic would you hope for? Making a difference, its positive impact.
Positive. Well, I'm not. I don't think DeFi is making a positive impact. So should I start there? Because I don't think because I think most DeFi that's become popular and that's had success over the past few years hasn't been truly sufficiently decentralized, and a lot of it carries the burden of being either relying on a centralized entity like Chainlink and its multi-sig, or having its own admin key, or having a DAO controlled by like three whales, whatever it might be. All of those situations create more risks than you would actually experience in CeFi. So I think that the acceptance of those risks and the inability of people in this space to discuss them in a reasonable and rational way is building a sort of complacency among users here that just makes them think, oh, we are working on something novel and this new tech that's going to change the world in a positive way, when in reality they're kind of creating a surveillance nightmare, because all of this is going to be ownable. That's the problem. When you have something that's centrally controlled, that also means that central control can be transferred to another party. And that's when you need to start thinking about, what would it look like if Chainlink was acquired by JP Morgan? What would it look like if Aave, well,
I think we lost you again there.
My AirPods keep disconnecting. What would it look like if these things happen? You need to start thinking about this, because as long as that central control is available, it's also transferable. So for those reasons, I don't think right now there's much in DeFi that can be said to be having a long-term net positive effect. There are things like what you guys are doing, I think is good, barring this Australia thing, which I need to think more about. But immutable protocols like Liquidity, of course, them also barring the Chainlink thing. Uniswap protocol versions 1 through 3, barring the version 4 that's inevitably going to have KYC and other nonsense in there. All the stuff that's the building blocks that I'm talking about here is good, but the stuff that you need to use that with is all pretty bad. So if we're going to talk about net positives for DeFi, all those positives have to outweigh the surveillance risk and the privacy loss that I think is building and is inevitable if TradFi and sort of the big players in the banking space gain control, which I think is inevitable, especially when you have architects of the space like Consensus, literally partially owned by JP Morgan, actually out there building CBDCs for Korea, Thailand, France, and other countries, and out there actively trying to partner up with decentralized protocols like you guys. So I just see red flags everywhere.
I think you touched on something that's pretty relevant for Rocket Pool, in that Chainlink is at the center of a lot of DeFi, and because of oracles, right? We have to figure out a way to get information onto the blockchain that's not native to a blockchain, and that is a very difficult question. And how can you do that in a trustless manner? Unfortunately, the marketplace is incredibly thin, with pretty much Chainlink being the gold standard, after which it falls off the cliff. And so Rocket Pool's approach so far has been pretty agnostic towards oracles, and the team has even built their own oracles on several different layers. But I was wondering if you could give a brief TLDR about what the risks Chainlink poses to the DeFi ecosystem as a whole are.
So Chainlink is a novel system. Chainlink is widely used because it's really the only solution that is reliable, as far as oracles go. And the most common response I get when I complain about Chainlink is, well, what's the better way? That's never a good answer. If there is no better way to do it, it means you have a massive technology gap in your system, in your thinking. And the only way you can plug it up is with a centralized tool. Which means your entire product is probably not ready to actually live. It's not, if you're actually seeking decentralization and you're relying on Chainlink, you're just not ready for prime time because you haven't figured out the Oracle problem. And people are just too lazy to do it now because they have this solution that people are just accepting. And the problem with Chainlink currently, in its current iteration, is that if you're a developer and you just plug Chainlink oracles into your app, every Chainlink price feed is upgradable. The smart contracts are upgradable. The price sources are upgradable and changeable. All of it's changeable by a 4 of 9 multisig. 1 4 of 9 multisig, not one for each price feed. 1 4 of 9 multisig has the capability to modify any Chainlink price feed at any time with zero notice. The holders of the keys of this multisig are unknown. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows where they live. Nobody knows what kind of security they're using. And nobody knows what their intentions are. So that's a pretty big problem, right? It's pretty huge. When 4 people you think could be just one, it's very easy for one person to have all the keys to the multisig. So you almost have to default, if you're thinking adversarially, as you should, because everything in this space is irreversible. You only get one chance. One person is able to change any price feed for Chainlink at any time. What would happen if they did that? What would happen if they changed the price of ETH right now to $800? Imagine the liquidations. Aave, first of all. Aave relies on Chainlink with no backup, no sanity check, no double check. Most of the larger DeFi protocols that use Chainlink at least do a double check of the data, make sure, against Uniswap or something like that. Aave does none. Okay, Aave right there could kill everything with the liquidations. Everything would just completely be destroyed, just based on that alone. But then you think about the domino effects, the black swans we would see throughout the industry. For all of that to hinge on potentially one person holding multi-sig keys, the fact that people are okay with this, the fact that there's still billions of dollars in this space, even with this risk, means 2 things. 1, people don't understand the risk, and 2, the people that do understand it do not care. And they will care. And you know what? When the shit hits the fan, the government's going to come running in, and they're going to regulate it, and they're going to pass laws and all that kind of stuff, and people are going to be crying to their mommy government for their money back, when in reality, they just should have been following me on Twitter, right, Jasper? They just should have been following me on Twitter. They would have known everything.
I do have to agree. The Chainlink Oracle situation across DeFi is pretty disappointing, and I am really encouraging new Oracle systems come on board. Langers, any thoughts?
Yeah, with Chainlink, they've got a bit of a moat in the sense that, particularly Aave, Aave kind of requires a Chainlink Oracle, and a lot of other protocols do, until other entrants come on the market and are adopted by those other protocols. You're not going to kind of. I think competition in the Oracle market is definitely what's needed. I think also Chainlink kind of addressing those concerns is important as well. Yeah,
they have.
They're my kind of thoughts.
They've addressed it. They've said, yeah, we have a multi-sig. Deal with it. That's what they've said. They have no intention of relinquishing central control because, like I said before, as long as they have central control, they can transfer it. And eventually, every startup wants to be a unicorn, right? Every startup wants to exit. Do not be surprised to see it. The control is there. It can be transferred. It can be regulated. Chainlink could be regulated. Chainlink could be forced to include certain price feeds. Chainlink could, it can also, of course, it could change its price feeds to only serve paying customers. There's all sorts of things that they can do with that central control. They're not going to give it up. They're greedy. They want what any business wants. So, and as far as other players coming into the space, it won't make a difference if they're equally centralized, and nobody's been able to sort out. The tech just isn't there yet to build truly decentralized Oracle systems. And it's been a constant problem from the start. And the fact that humans, and we're talking the species of Homo sapiens, right? The entire human population on this planet has not figured out a way to build a decentralized Oracle system. It means that we're just not ready yet. We're not ready for this kind of tech. So everything we're doing, we're just ramming through with the biggest piece missing, which is the Oracle. And doing what we're doing right now, taking these shortcuts, is going to ultimately impact our privacy in massive ways. And it's going to give governments unprecedented control over pricing, over everything that we do online. And that's my biggest fear.
So, kind of, I think this is probably going to be the last question, because we've got to kind of do the bi-weekly. But yeah, what do you think? What does good decentralized governance look like to you?
It looks like Bitcoin, where you have basically every participant in the system. They're a miner, a node operator, a validator, right down to just straight up users and holders. Everybody plays a role. Everybody votes in some way. And we see very little of that, if any, in DeFi. I don't think that one token, one vote works at all. I think it's been a disaster. Because, any system that can be ruled straight up by the amount of money that you have is doomed to fail, because you and I are never going to have a say. It's always going to be the giant banks. It's always going to be the giant corporations and institutions. These are the same organizations and institutions that Bitcoin was created to get away from, to take power from. And everything that we're seeing so far in DeFi governance has gone the opposite direction. I think there's lots of stuff that hasn't been tried yet, or tried adequately. I mean, like Curve is interesting, the way they use time as an asset. I haven't really seen any good experiments yet with quadratic voting. But I think DeFi governance's biggest problem is that it's all driven by greed. And greed is good and bad at the same time. All these tokens have a price. People want them to go up in value. And that's what's driving the governance experiments. If it wasn't driven just straight up by greed, we might be seeing a lot more interesting stuff happening. I would love to see DeFi governance token eventually come out that's not transferable, that's not necessarily associated with a price. Find other ways to do this that aren't just about selling and buying your voting shares. So anyway, I could go on about that for a while, but I know we're out of time.
Yeah, no, that's really good to get your insights, actually. I mean, from Rocket Pool's perspective, we are certainly we're at the start of our journey, really, in terms of our kind of governance. We're definitely evolving kind of over time, and kind of strengthening things and refining over time. So yeah, I think we're certainly on a kind of a pathway, but we're striving for kind of maximal decentralization and all of this sort of thing as well. So no, it's been a great chat, Chris, and thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, hopefully we can kind of have you on again soon.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm a fan of Rocket Pool, despite all the crap I've been saying. And I still, at some point, want to talk about the reason we even decided to do a Twitter space, which is, the critique I was kind of throwing at you guys for partnering, so to speak, with MetaMask.
Yeah.
When consensus is doing so much to destroy our privacy. But anyway, I guess that's another chat for another time.
Yeah, I'm tempted to lead into it, but I'm also tempted. I'm also aware of the time. I mean, we can have a quick chat about that. So, I mean, from our perspective, the kind of MetaMask thing, really, we kind of see it as, you know, so for decentralized products to have kind of any sort of, you know, positive impact on the world, they have to have reach. And notice I didn't say necessarily success or growth. I'm saying kind of reach, and they need to be successful in the sense that they need to, you know, be in the hands of people, use them, and that sort of thing. You know, for that, you kind of, the early majority don't at the moment currently use a lot of, you know, DeFi stuff. A lot of them use the kind of centralized platforms, or they come via MetaMask and that sort of thing. And so those sorts of companies are kind of gateways for the early majority. So that's kind of where we kind of see it. You know, we want to have kind of an impact. We want to have that reach, and so kind of partnering with those companies does actually enable that. That is definitely something that, but we are very, very mindful of, you know, kind of the fact that, you know, they're not influencing the protocol, that, you know, we stick to the vision that we have. We're very aware that they are kind of, you know, profit-seeking corporations and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll open that up to you.
It could have integrated Rocket Pool, or they could have just put the stake button without you guys even being involved with it, right?
We were involved from a technical perspective. So that basically they came to us and they just dealt with us from a technical perspective.
But isn't it a simple integration where they just have a stake button and it just stakes right into your smart contract?
Yes, although there's things like kind of like the rETH APR and that sort of thing to kind of calculate. There's a few little bits and pieces there. I mean, it's not a complicated thing. To be honest, we didn't have to do that much. Like I think we've had like 3 calls with them, just to kind of go over some of those details. So it's not like we've been like that hands-on.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll just leave it with this. But my concern with that group is a lot of what I said before. You know, I think that that they're confused as a company, and I think that there's a battle going on between actually people who want to build decentralized stuff there, but also people who want to ruin the planet with CBDCs and central banking control. You know, it's all going on within consensus, and I'm very skeptical of any partnerships that they put together with decentralized protocols. And by the way, do you know how much money they make on swap fees with their MetaMask swap? I mean, they're making. I haven't seen numbers recently, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a lot of money. They're making a lot of money just from people who don't know any better. From the swap button in MetaMask.
They also have a secret hidden fee for their staking feature, which, however, just simply hasn't been enabled yet. So
you're kidding me. God damn, see, this is what I was afraid of. Look what you've done.
I think what's interesting about this whole discussion is that most of the effort was purely on MetaMask's side, whereas, and it just speaks to the Rocket Pool's permissionless nature, where it is this ground level protocol that ultimately CeFi and DeFi institutions alike will end up incorporating into the back end, simply because it is, as we said earlier, a cockroach, a survivor, and it has this decentralized and lasting quality that essentially everyone's going to gravitate towards in the long run. But again, thank you for your time, Chris. Really lovely talk. And I'm glad we did end up getting to discuss the main purpose of this call.
Thank you.
With that, let's now transition to the second half, which will be discussing the bi-weekly update. And I want to thank Maverick for moving this now over to Medium. I think Medium is a great place to be hosting this. So the last 2 weeks for Rocket Pool have been exciting as usual. Mini pool count, RE supply, and everything has continued to grow at an accelerated pace, and we are now approaching 200,000 staked ETH, 200,000 rETH. So general thoughts quickly on how Rocket Pool has been growing.
Yeah, it's been quite consistent. It's like a annualized growth of about 150%. Obviously, with Atlas coming up, that's going to change quite considerably, hopefully. But that's kind of the goal of the release. So we'll see a big influx then. But like, I mean, even with our current collateral levels and all of that sort of stuff, it's growing, very, very quickly.
Yeah, we recently had 1KX major whales start spinning up pools, and several other major protocol whales like Marco Barco spinning up. So growth has sustained. So that's awesome. In the world of the smart node, preparation is ongoing for version 1.8, which is going to be a pretty massive upgrade, including new Grafana dashboards that Joe had been teasing in the Discord, as well as split mode support for Nimbus, the addition of Lodestar, and in the background, Atlas preparation is still continuing. What I really want to touch on in this section on the smart node, however, is what Joe has been alluding to with for a little while now, and that is the efficiency upgrade to the smart node and watchtower. And this is what's going to allegedly improve efficiency by 3 orders of magnitude, and that's really a mind-boggling amount. So can you give us a little insight on how this is progressing?
Yeah, Joe's done amazing work on that. So essentially, like, technically, he's implemented some kind of improvements where it kind of loads all the state that it needs and then does all this calculation stuff on this kind of cache state. So it makes it very, very efficient. And so the timings on things have gone way down. I think that probably the tree gen is also affected in that as well. So we should see the tree generation being a lot quicker, which obviously is great. It means that we're not waiting hours for the kind of tree gen to kind of finish. So no, it's a really great thing. I think he's also using it in lots of other places as well, so that everything is a lot snappy.
I feel like this is going to be fantastic for low power devices, ARM, and all that good stuff. Joe has also, I'll just leave it at that. So moving on from the smart node to research and design, the major topic on mind is the Atlas audits. As of last call, the consensus diligent report had been back, and now the team has been triaging and getting ready to fix what was found. How has that process been going? Anything abnormal compared to the usual audit feedback routine?
Yeah, so no, it's gone really, really well, actually. So they came back. They did actually find one critical, which was fantastic. It means that we can kind of fix that. But then the rest of it wasn't too bad at all. Like there's much less than. So I put in a lot of time for triaging the fixes and for us to kind of go through and fix them and that sort of thing. But Kane has managed to kind of fix them quite quickly. So so that's been really good. So that is good. So we are just wrapping. We've handed that back to them today, actually. So they will go through and do a fix check to make sure that we've resolved those issues, and that they're actually resolved. Once that's kind of done, I think the timing is basically that once that's done, we can deploy things to Gorelli, I think at that point we can, depending on when they launch,
Oh, sorry, I accidentally muted you there. You were talking about Gorelli testnet next week. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
There you go. Thanks. So we're aiming to have the code on Gorelli next week. I think depending on when they actually open up the report to the public, I think we just need to follow up with Sigma on their report. We can then make those reports public. Then also what we'll do ideally next week, I've got to double check some stuff, but ideally next week we would also essentially make the code that we've got for Atlas included in the Immunified bug bounty thing. So what that means is that the bug bounty program will be relevant to the Atlas code, not the current mainnet code. So that'll be a big thing. Yeah,
that'll definitely give people time to actually look at the code and make some significant progress before actual launch happens.
Yeah, and we'll do some kind of announcing of that to make sure we get eyes on and that sort of stuff as well.
I have two questions. Is there a planned larger Medium article that will be like announcing the coming months? And also, how long do you estimate the Gorelli testnet lasting?
So in terms of the Medium article, we are aiming to have it out this week. It might be like very, very early next week, like kind of Monday or Tuesday or something. But we are aiming to get it out this week. So that will go through what's included in Atlas and kind of like a little bit overview of the kind of the timeline for it. So that'll be something that we can kind of point to and say that's what we're delivering in Atlas. This is why we're doing it and all that sort of thing. And that's where we can start kind of building up a bit of a media thing around that. So that's coming very, very soon. In terms of Gorelli, as I said, we'll release it next week. It will run. It'll just continue running. Now, obviously, the Atlas code will be on there, and so people will be able to test certain things. They won't be able to test other things because it depends on when the core devs release. So Shanghai, whatever you want to call it, to Gorelli. I need to double check my timeline to see roughly when that's going to be, or when I estimate that to be. But essentially, you'll be able to do things like spin up LEB8s on Gorelli, test all of that stuff. Test the smart node, because there's a lot of stuff that's I guess changed in the smart node from an optimization perspective and all that sort of thing. So we need to go through and test that stuff. Once Shanghai is being turned on for Gorelli, then we can start testing the withdrawal stuff, the solo migration stuff, and all of this sort of thing as well. So that'll run for those weeks, and we'll kind of test as much as we can on Gorelli, and that'll be open to everybody. Everyone can participate in that. And so if you want to participate in that, make sure your Gorelli nodes are kind of synced so that you can kind of participate in that testing.
Speaking of testing, the team is currently doing testing on the Zhejiang testnet. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So Zhejiang is post Shanghai now. So we're going through and testing what that looks like. I must admit, playing with post Shanghai stuff, it's so exciting. so like seeing the ETH coming back and that sort of thing, the rewards coming back is really cool. Playing around with the LEB8s and the credit stuff, and it's really cool, and I'm getting excited already. But yeah, we've got like a whole suite of tests that we're running. This is an integration kind of test, because obviously up until this point, we haven't been able to kind of test it, like the withdrawal stuff with the Ethereum code that's doing the withdrawals. We weren't too worried about it. Like there's no reason why we would be worried about it, but it's good to kind of see it all happening, and you know, and feel it, and see it. So that's really great. There's some obviously some changes with the smart node stacks. We're doing a lot of kind of integration and testing around that, and kind of just refining the smart node stack, you know, for on the chain.
It must be exciting after all this time. In some ways, the true version of Ethereum is out, at least on testnet. So, in other news, the ODAO has just today or yesterday raised and executed a patch to rectify an exploit that had been carried out over the past couple of weeks, which was preventing node operators from withdrawing RPL. Broadly, this exploit used the stake for function to dust high RPL collateralized node operators such that they were limited to withdrawing. They were unable to withdraw for another 28 days. So what was the team's reaction to this exploit and the process of getting this patch out?
Yeah, so obviously, as soon as it was kind of disclosed, we kind of, you know, put up an action plan in place to, you know, figure out what we're going to do about it. Pretty much like well, we tested out what we thought that the change was going to be on Gorelli, but got out raised the proposal for a fix. Well, it's actually a disabling of the stake for functionality initially. So that's what the patch is at the moment. It's just to disable that so that it's no longer. So we contained the issue. A kind of a full fix is scheduled for Atlas. So Kane's just done that, and so that's in the Atlas code now. So that when we go live with Atlas, you know, the stake 4 will be back, but it'll be back in a different version. So in other words, so currently anyone can do a stake on behalf of, but going forward there'll be a whitelist. So as a node operator, you'll be able to whitelist particular addresses that you want to be able to use that functionality, which is much better. And so, you know, that'll kind of roll out with Atlas. So the stake 4 will be back. It's just it'll just have that kind of whitelist involved in it. So obviously we had to wait for the ODAO to. So every you know, kind of proposal has a 7-day period for the ODAO to kind of, or the ODAO and the community to have a look at the fix and see, you know, what it's all about and all that sort of thing. So if we kind of communicate that when it was raised, and then the ODAO executed yesterday. So that now the stake 4 has been kind of disabled, and so note that is no longer open to that kind of griefing.
There's some interesting game theory about that 7-day window, whereby when the team announced that the patch was going to be implemented, it seems like it may have spurred on the attacker to realize now's the time to go. But
yeah. Although, although it would be better, it would have been better to have executed the attack at the end of the period rather than the beginning.
Right.
But I don't know where. Not that. Anyway.
Not attacker this.
Yeah.
So a question about the implementation process. So now that stake 4 function is disabled, the people who were dusted, they're still unable to withdraw, correct, for this 28-day period, or whatever is left of their 28-day period?
That is correct, yes. But obviously they can't be dusted again, and so that period will just end. It was depending on whether they stake or not, but that period will end on the 28 days.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad.
Unfortunately, we had to keep the because we were asking essentially for like an emergency fix, we had to keep the scope, the footprint of the change very, very small. And so that's why we just did the disable rather than kind of fixing it so that other people, so that the affected people could unstake. But yeah, that was kind of just a limitation on our part.
Yeah, I'm assuming it would have required another round of audits for a wider scope change like that, or more expansive audits than were available at the time.
Yeah, that's right. And we want to kind of keep the risk as small as possible.
So moving on now to integrations. Vesper Finance has integrated rETH, and to talk about their integration, Maverick did a Twitter space call with them. So if you are interested in finding out ways you can use Vesper Finance to boost yield on your rETH, make sure you go give that a listen.
I don't think we've had them on one of our spaces yet, so that's something we can work on post ETH Denver to get a bit more of a detailed explanation for people who are curious.
There was also a comment from someone who is a representative of what they claim to be a sister protocol to Vesper in the Discord. So seems like a pretty interesting community. Definitely worth a shout.
Was that Metronome, I think?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, we're having a chat to them, so watch this space.
Sweet. A fairly prominent series of DeFi integrations happened recently, leading off with the Aave integration. rETH is now live on Aave. This has been a very long time in the making. Aave is the preeminent lending market for a variety of different assets. The most important about the Aave integration for rETH is that now users are able to borrow ETH against their rETH and essentially create folded positions or hyper-staked rETH positions to boost yield dramatically at the risk of having to manage health factor and leverage. So this has been something that has been an issue for different liquid staking providers in the past, such as Steve, where excess leverage in the system caused their peg to collapse. The ecosystem has learned quite a bit from that moment, and now there are somewhat more rigid supply caps in place, as well as fee structures to make that less likely to happen. Darren, how has the team's perspective on Aave and hyper-staking evolved over time, and how do you think Aave is going to change the landscape of Rocket Pool moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, rETH utility is really important. Like the more that people can use rETH in kind of DeFi, the more kind of utility it kind of has. So you can kind of like choose your own adventure. If you just want to kind of hold rETH, that is a perfectly valid thing to do as well. You just hold rETH, and that's as kind of stable as you can get. But then you can then choose your own adventure within kind of like the DeFi ecosystem. So utility is very important. Debt markets are a thing that we kind of look at quite carefully because of the kind of impact that they can have on the broader ecosystem. We're really glad that there's more protections in place for that sort of thing, and that the debt markets have kind of learned from that lesson. So that's really great. Aave is a key kind of pillar within DeFi. A lot of things are built on top of Aave. So I've kind of said there's like this Maslow's hierarchy of integrations, and lending. So you can have liquidity on the bottom, and then you have kind of debt markets or lending protocols in the middle, and then at the very top you've got this whole bunch of, or in the middle you've also got other things, but a lot of the options and all that sort of stuff. But then at the top you have a lot of kind of like vaults and yield aggregators and on all of that other stuff that kind of brings all of the things together that is kind of integrated. So so an Aave is kind of a key to that. I mean, Maker was fantastic, but Aave is definitely one. You know, personally, leverage isn't my thing, but I think it's great, used in a well-balanced diet. It's a sometimes food, as I say. But everyone has different kind of risk tolerances, and also different parts of their portfolio and that sort of thing. So I totally kind of respect that. So yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. It's really exciting to kind of have Aave. As I said, it's kind of like a key pillar of kind of DeFi, and it increases the utility of rETH by quite a lot.
If you are interested in using the Aave integration for rETH, DeFi Saver is a front end that has already set up recipes where you can go and instantly get into a levered rETH position with just a few clicks, without having to go through the rather gas-intensive and laborious process of depositing your rETH, buying ETH or borrowing ETH, swapping your ETH for rETH, depositing that new rETH, borrowing more ETH. It gets very gas-intensive. So DeFi Saver has made that very simple to do, and they've actually got a great front end for looking at it and analyzing it. One thing notable about the rETH integration is that it comes without the enabling of E-mode. E-mode is a new feature of Aave that allows for kind of extreme leverage. I believe it's 10x leverage. However, Rocket Pool has been onboarded in the normal state without E-mode enabled. However, this is something to look for in the future as Aave and Gauntlet and Chaos collect more data about how safe and how effective the collateral process is for rETH. So while we do have the Aave integration, there is still more Aave to be said in the future. As you mentioned earlier, Aave is the second of the DeFi tie-ins we've been talking a lot of, the other one being MakerDAO. MakerDAO governance recently voted to reduce the stability fee on the rETH vault from 1.5% to only 0.5%. So now, if you're minting DAI against rETH, you only have to pay 0.5% against that DAI, which is pretty incredible because there's a lot of opportunities in DeFi to earn quite a bit more than 0.5% that you're paying. So if you are looking to mint DAI, there is no better time than right now. This is also followed with a debt ceiling increase. Any comments on this sort of progressive integration of rETH into the MakerDAO system?
No, that's perfect. It's going in the right direction. Particularly the reduce in the rate. That's really great. I mean, the debt ceiling I think is awesome as well. Not quite sure what it's at the moment, but it's good to kind of have that confidence from MakerDAO.
I believe the new debt ceiling is 10 million, but I'm not positive. But yeah, it's been awesome that they are willing to work.
Pretty sure it's 10 million.
Yeah, it's awesome that the MakerDAO community has been willing to work with Rocket Pool and get us these favorable terms. Another major advent for Rocket Pool is that Coinbase has fully listed RPL now. Originally, RPL was only available for trading in the advanced trade feature, but now RPL is openly tradable throughout the app. This is useful as this gives more access to RPL holders and is awesome. Yield Protocol and Silo Finance have both integrated rETH as collateral. I believe these are fixed lending markets that allow for leverage and similar hyperstaking of your rETH. So it's very interesting to see the growth of isolated lending markets and open lending markets like Aave as they somewhat compete against each other, where the main difference being the amount of fees you pay and the security you get. So great to see these protocols integrating rETH. Oops, sorry, I was muted there. Additionally, there has been a huge slew of centralized exchanges that have listed RPL. They're too many to name. However, you can see them all on the update. As always, make sure you do your due diligence, as centralized exchanges can be very risky. Not your keys, not your crypto. In the world of governance, we have had a few major topics going on. The incentives on optimism were shifted from the volatile AMM pool to the stable AMM pool. So if you're using Velodrome for liquidity farming with your rETH tokens, make sure you are in the proper pool. This is somewhat unfortunate, as even before the tokens were being awarded to the pool, we had raised the issue to Velodrome that the pool was unbalanced. However, they were unable to help us fix it, and their suggestion of sort of letting it wait turned out not to work. So it's glad that is fixed now, but it was a situation I think could have been avoided. In happier news, the rocket scientists plus myself and Kron were onboarded to the Oracle DAO. This is a pretty awesome moment, a culmination of the community meeting the more institutionalized part of the protocol. Any comments from the team on this process?
Yeah, I'm really excited about kind of onboarding the rocket scientists and yourself and Kron. I think it's certainly. I think there's a chance to kind of have like a bridge between the kind of two bodies, I guess. So that's really exciting. But it's also kind of rewarding. You know, the rocket scientists do a lot for the community, and they do it because they are extremely passionate about Rocket Pool, and it's good that they are kind of they're not only are they kind of being rewarded kind of financially about it, but they are kind of rewarded in the sense that they're also part of this kind of governance structure as well. So no, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think we sort of like long-term align a lot of core community members to the protocol, as well as create the first sort of true voice at the table for some Oracle DAO issues. So in terms of formal governance, 3 RPIPs have been closed and have all passed. I believe these related to protocol settings for Atlas, and so that the rETH deposit pool will be set to 18K in the lead up, as well as some managerial issues. Is there any update on that process of doing the 18K ETH deposit pool? Kane's just going to do a Flashbots bundle. Has that been worked out?
So he has just started it today. So
Sweet.
So we're working through that on how that will kind of unfold. We just kind of scoped out the setting changes. I think we're kind of testing those out on Zhisheng anyway, but from the bundle kind of perspective, he's kind of working through that kind of this week.
Got it. Glad that's getting time. So other governance topics, there have been a variety of threads. So notably, we are looking for nominations. I believe that deadline was today, the sort of pseudo deadline. Nominations to fill the GMC positions. I believe 3 slots are available. The GMC is a high time consumption, semi-high time consumption role, but it is incredibly important. And it can do wonders for the growth of the protocol. So if you care about Rocket Pool and you have time that you're willing to use, please nominate yourself for the GMC. We have also had details on the January GMC reward allocation. We have the pre-bounty thread for bountiful discussion of bounties, which is a placeholder thread to discuss things that people want for the next bounty period. There have been a variety of things proposed, such as a DAO coordinator, various data analyses, and things of that nature, sort of a brainstorming thread for when the next bounty round comes around. If you are looking for sort of potential ways to contribute to the protocol, this thread might be a good head start before the bounty round officially begins. We also had the IMC period 7 budget posted with some modest RPL reductions, mainly due to the fact that the RPL ETH ratio has gone up so much that our usual amount would be pretty high relative. Our usual amount of RPL would actually be overpaying in bribes. We have also been discussing partnerships with a variety of other chains and protocols. So if you are interested in how the IMC makes use of its funds, check out the thread in the Discord titled rETH Liquidity Incentives. So now we can shift over to media and marketing, as we have covered the meaty parts of the bi-weekly. Mav, should we hit that up here or save that for the...
I think we can keep going. By my count, we only have one more community call before ETH Denver, and I'm imagining that one will be pretty heavy on ETH Denver details. So let's see if we can power through the rest of the bi-weekly. I guess if we kind of have that 90-minute call guide, which seems to be normal quite now, we can probably get through, albeit what is a very long marketing and media section.
Sweet. So the community is hosting a workshop at ETH Denver on February 26th, the Builder workshop. Do you have any details? Have you heard much about that? I believe this is being led by Fornax.
Yeah, that's right. So the Rocket Pool team, we're attending the main event. We arrive on the 28th. I'm not sure exactly how much we'll get up to on that day, coming off the long haul flights. And then the next day, March 1st, likely to be mostly taken out with setup. And then from 2nd of March onwards is the kind of main event. But it does look like there's some community presence beforehand for what I think at least informally is called the hackathon. I don't know if ETH Denver like us calling it that, but it's pretty much what it is. So yeah, great to see. I guess another example of the benefit of such a strong community like Rocket Pool's is that it's possible to go and engage in events like this, and we've been helping to support with potentially getting some stickers made available for people who attend that workshop.
Sweet. Love seeing the community step up and take action like that. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Recent calls by Rocket Pool have been joined by Hexagon app as well as MISO Finance. They are now on the YouTube, so make sure you check those out.
Yeah, I have to say this bi-weekly was probably the first one where going back over the last 2 weeks to collate everything that happened, there was a bit of a mixture of I can't believe all this happened plus like really did that happen? Was that only 2 weeks ago? Because as we tend to say on these calls, the length of the bi-weekly is up only. So there were a couple of community calls, as you would expect. We do them once a week. Hexagon app in particular, quite interesting that let me start again. MISO Finance, for example, there's been a bit of coverage on Twitter and interaction within the Discord, but if you haven't listened to the call with a representative from Hexagon app, you might not know much about it. It's being built by Golem Foundation, which has some parallels to Rocket Pool, being founded many years ago, and executing a successful ICO back in the day when that was all the rage, just like when Rocket Pool did. And there was a little bit of bread during that call. At least I think we ended up covering it in terms of Hexagon's intention to see what they can do to support Rocket Pool, recognizing that we are a protocol that's helping to kind of advance or protect the decentralization of Ethereum, and especially in the liquid staking world, one of, if not the only protocol that's really aligned as much as possible with Ethereum's core values. So that one in particular, I'd recommend the first section. I think it was only 20 or so minutes. Everyone to go and have a listen to that. We do have a new method for getting the recordings of these Twitter Spaces onto YouTube as well. So that should hopefully be a lot quicker in terms of the turnaround of the call closing and then the recording being made available.
Awesome. Glad for that update. Yeah, it feels like Elon is slowly rugging us more and more over time. So glad that there is a better way. An additional thing that happened is that DabDab put up a nice analysis about how LEB8s give a somewhat pseudo 42% boost in yield over solo staking. This Twitter thread was then picked up by a crypto news article site. So definitely give that thread a read. It's pretty powerful stuff. Good narrative.
Yeah, and again, a good example of the community being able to communicate out some things that may not necessarily be appropriate for the protocol itself to talk about, and also an example of how there's still very much a lot of attention on LSC protocols in general, Rocket Pool in particular, not only the usual kind of Twitter activity that you would expect in terms of engagement there and retweets and the like, but an actual media publication covering it. So yeah, that was great to see, and probably an example of the hype that will build up around Atlas and migrations once we're able to get things out like this Medium article and some calls that we have planned for hopefully next week to discuss Atlas in more detail.
Speaking of community-led pieces, I was fortunate enough to be interviewed by DeFi Dad on his new podcast, The Edge. We talked about Rocket Pool 101, my journey into crypto, and a little bit of future theory crafting. And so if you're looking for something to give to people who are fairly new to Rocket Pool, I would highly recommend it. It was a great time, and glad that we got this filmed.
It's on my watch list.
I think you'll enjoy it. There's a dig I make towards certain groups towards the end that I hope you'll enjoy. So Twitter has been popping off for Rocket Pool as the LSD narrative has been in full swing. Byzantine General, Smolting, Inverse Bra, Degen Spartan have all been talking about the orange coin, the real orange coin, not the coin. Really.
Yeah, I kind of hesitated how much coverage to give this topic in the biweekly. Whatever your opinions of influencers are, it's still a fact of the industry that when they talk about certain narratives or protocols or technology, there are a lot of people that listen. I think it's a good sign that some of these larger and more influential accounts are talking about liquid staking. It kind of reinforces the fact that it is important. It's a topic that's at the front of people's minds. They want to learn more about it, hear more about it. At the end of the day, that's what influencers are going to talk about, right? They're not going to talk about protocols or technology or topics that are irrelevant. They know that their kind of success, if you want to call it that, is based off engagement. These examples being on Twitter. But yeah, we've, over the past few biweekly reports, emphasized the amount of coverage that, again, LSDs, Rocket Pool have been getting since the start of the year. And sort of a good opportunity to show that it's kind of across all areas of the industry, both some of the larger media outlets through to the less traditional kind of new media coverage.
Yeah, and just to list off some of the traditional media coverage Maverick is talking about, the Defiant put out a piece on Rocket Pool's recent strong performance, as did CoinDesk. Uh, we also had Cointelegraph commenting on the potential for Rocket Pool to gain market cap, as well as Bloomberg even. And of course, even CoinDesk commented on the transparency of Rocket Pool in the context of the Kraken controversies. So both the traditional side of media as well as the degenerate side of media, they've all been enjoying Rocket Pool. Great to see this sort of a all-encompassing movement growing. And speaking of growing, Rocket Pool's TVL has grown so fast that it crossed $1 billion in both TVL and briefly market cap. So congratulations to the team for now being owners of a unicorn, or well, quote unquote owners, I should say, developers for a unicorn. So my hats off to you.
Just pulled up DeFi Llama. It's back at 960. Let's round that up to $69 million TVL, which is still pretty impressive considering how volatile this industry can be. And we're also 800 staked ETH away from 400,000 staked ETH. So if anyone has a bit of dust lying around in their wallet and they don't mind eating a bit of a premium, that opportunity is there to be the one to cross the 400,000 staked ETH mark. But yeah, definitely a lot of growth going on, and I feel like it's just a sign of things to come.
Absolutely. So moving on, we had some analysis posted on Twitter by Jake Paffor. I definitely recommend checking these out. Again, there's been a groundswell of people doing their independent research on Rocket Pool and liquid staking derivatives. There's also been a recent one just today. Someone was coming into the Discord asking for a review of their article. So look around. There is tons of stuff being written by people for Rocket Pool. And if you see something that might be incorrect, make sure you let them know. This is a nascent scene, and the people listening here are probably more experts in the field than they realize. Darren was... Yep. Oh,
yeah, just quickly. I'm pretty sure I managed to capture all of the larger news pieces. When it comes to Twitter, it's, yeah, again, pretty much a constant stream of content. There are a couple examples listed of pieces that got particularly good traction or were kind of well put together and in depth. Certainly many more that were left out. It is pretty much non-stop. People like to talk about Rocket Pool.
That they do. And people also like to talk to Langers to talk about Rocket Pool, including blockmates. So anything you want to say briefly about the call with more blockmates? I'm not too familiar with them.
Yeah, it was a fun chat. They seem to have a reasonable kind of presence, and the host, and now I'm forgetting his name, so I apologize. But it was very switched on, knows what's going on in the kind of market and that sort of thing. So it was a good chat.
Nice. Langers was also on a call hosted by Index Coop, including representatives from Lido and Stakewise. So that was a nice panel discussion, and I believe much less spicy than the last time such a panel was assembled. And to top off the trio conversations, Langers also was on the ETH Staker community call about withdrawals. So Langers' airtime has been very busy of late, so I'm glad you have made it out to be with us today.
And Langers will also be on another call, a panel that's being arranged, and that is later this week, at least for the US, Sunday kind of afternoon, evening. Thankfully for Australia, that makes it Monday morning, so very convenient there, and it will be loaded into the events section of Discord, at the very least a placeholder shortly after this call. So make sure you tune into that. That's definitely one worth listening to. Similar to the Index Coop, panel discussion. It is a panel, and it will involve some household names in the world of liquid staking.
That's great to hear. More content, the merrier. And with that, that just about summarizes or wraps up today's call. So, in summary, we started today's conversation with a special guest, Chris Blec, who is a large critic of the centralized weak points of DeFi, with some pretty unique views. So we discussed some of the flaws in the current DeFi landscape, as well as how centralized institutions have been using Rocket Pool, a permissionless platform, to sort of build out their own products. This conversation was pretty interesting and touched on Chainlink oracles and the fact that Rocket Pool has, despite being used by larger centralized institutions, remained fairly truthful to its decentralized ethos and open source ethos. In the second half of today's call, we jumped into the bi-weekly update, which is now hosted on Medium. Growth has been fairly consistent, and interestingly, in the world of the smart node, a huge 3 order of magnitude update is pending, which will bring down the requirements of the Watchtower and smart node drastically. In the world of R&D, the Atlas audits were received back, and feedback has been submitted back to the auditors to be reviewed, hopefully with Gurley testnet going live next year, or not next year, next week. We are also hoping for a Medium article, official Medium article, either this week or the next. The team, in the meanwhile, has been testing Atlas on Zhejiang. The ODAI also recently executed a patch to rectify the recent exploit. In the world of integrations, Aave has launched rETH on mainnet, meaning you can now fold your rETH in the Aave ecosystem. MakerDAO reduced the stability fee of rETH to 0.5% and increased the supply cap, making it cheaper and easier to mint DAI with your rETH. Coinbase has also fully onboarded RPL into their ecosystem instead of just allocating it to the advanced trade side. Yield protocol and Silo Finance are two fixed yield protocols, fixed borrowing protocols, that have onboarded rETH. And there has been a whole huge slew of SEX exchange that have onboarded RPL. In the world of governance, the rocket scientists were onboarded to the ODAO. The Optimism rewards have switched from the Velodrome stable AMM to the volatile AMM. 3 RBIPs were completed and passed in the world of setting up for Atlas and other managerial things. There have been calls for various governance topics, including filling GMC positions and discussing future bounties and the like. Media and marketing has an entire, several dozen things to discuss, but mainly everyone is talking about Rocket Pool. There have been calls, there have been articles, there have been Twitter threads, all types of media you can think has been out there. So for more detail, go check out the bi-weekly update on Medium and on this subreddit. That was today's call. Thank you, Mav and Darren, for joining us. And thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good call.